Greg Wooldridge, former Navy pilot, live in Portland, Oregon. I'm happy to be involved with this interview. I was in college, graduated with a wonderful C average, made the rest of you guys look really good in the upper part of the class. It was time to go serve my country. I was excited about that. But I wanted to do something that might lead into a career. As a young guy, I was looking at the airlines, right? I'll learn how to fly. And then go become an airline pilot. And that's how I started looking. I was going to serve one way or the other. So I took my degree and I went to the Navy recruiter. I saw the posters with planes. And that's how I picked it. And then I was fortunate and blessed to be able to get into naval aviation. When I interviewed with these reservists in Olathe, Kansas, Reserve Marine Corps F-4 pilots, they had me around the table. What do you want to fly? I said, I want to fly the thing with the most motors, the biggest, ugliest thing you got, because I want to be an airline pilot. And they just shook their heads, and they said, oh, man. Well, okay, we need pilots now, so we'll let you in. And then when I first stepped foot into Pensacola at Aviation Officer Candidate School, AOCS, saw the Blue Phantoms flying overhead at 200 feet. That changed my mind instantly. And I became focused on trying to get into tactical aviation and jets. You know, us young kids, you know, we said, what do you want to fly? And I looked at the plane I thought was the most beautiful plane I'd ever seen. That was the A-5 Vigilante. That was a sleek dart. I've never seen anything like that. I still think it's really cool. And that's what I wanted to fly. I got my wings in jets, in the jet pipeline. And there were too many pilots being winged, and I went back to Softly Field and I flew T-34s as a flight instructor. So I was we called them plowbacks, plowback to the training command. And we called ourselves the Filthy 50. There were 50 of us in that class that got their wings that went back to the training command. Probably one of the best things I've ever had happen to me and ever done. It was training Navy pilots, and magnificent, wonderful, rewarding. And from there, I did pretty well, and they said, well, what do you want to fly? What do you want to do next? I said, I want to fly in the fleet. They said, well, we'll get you an A-7 squadron. I said, that would be great. And that's how I got into A-7s. The Harley of the fleet, I call the A-7. Sure. So I went right to the fist of the fleet, VA-25. It was a cool airplane to me. I mean, and it was the A-7 Echo, you know, with a HUD, which quite a few years ago, that was the thing, right? The new thing. You have a HUD and an inertial navigation system, help you find your way around. And what was really kind of interesting about it for me, my experience in the RAG, the Replacement Air Group, VA-122, was they were all single-seaters. So your first flight was in a single-seat airplane. There was no two-seat trainer, you know, back in those days. So I thought that was pretty cool too. But you flew as you know, you had a wingman, or you were a wing. I can't remember which one, but you went out with an instructor and flew around. It was really cool. You know, I've got some notoriety for what I've done flying-wise. I failed at my first attempt at the ship, landing on the ship. I had 10 day landings and 6 at night, which was a requirement. But they said, that's not good enough. Not good enough. And I thought I was done. I thought, you know, they're going to can me. Gave me another instructor, Don Simmons, and he took me under his wing, and literally and figuratively, and we got it done. And from there, I got really focused on how to do it, and then went to the fleet, right into the fleet. The war had wound down. Yeah, it was just about over. I wanted to fly. You know, I got my wings. The Vietnam War was still on, and of course, as a Navy guy, everybody that flies tactical air in the Navy wants to be involved because that's what we train for. That's the essence of what you were doing there, right? To defend your country and to have wingmen and take care of your wingmen and your leads and those sort of things. So that's what I wanted to do. Never got to see that, but going in to VA-25 in 1974 was wonderful. My first carrier landing in the A-7 was on a wooden deck ship. The Lexington still had wooden decks and tiny decks, you know, and that was a challenge in a plane like the A-7, which had kind of a slow response time in the engine, to land on a little deck like that and make all those last-second corrections. So it was challenging. And it's you know, A-7's not a huge airplane, but pretty big for a 27 Charlie, I think they called that class
Right.
of carrier. Ranger was a bigger deck, obviously, a bigger ship, and a little bit less challenging, but carrier landings are always challenging. So, yeah, but it was good. It was really good. But flying the airplane, I remember my skipper, Pete Ogle, rest his soul, he had to eject from his airplane because there was a rubber diaphragm in the fuel control that had eroded or something, and he lost fuel to the engine, had to eject. So that was kind of an interesting thing. He made it out safely. He was fine. Mm-hmm. But to hear about that happening and see that happening, and then just other things like trying to put 4 tanks on an A7 so you could be a tanker, right? That was challenging, and that was a big load. And later on, when I was on the Enterprise, coming back one time with 4 tanks, and the Enterprise had that square island, and it made quite a burble, and you had to almost know where it was with the A7 engine response time to start bringing the power up before you got to the burble. And with 4 drop tanks, it was pretty cool. So I had one time touched down a little bit hard, heard a couple popping noises, but it was okay. But the A7, what a fun airplane to fly, and great endurance on station. I loved, my first experience with air-to-ground bombing and stuff like that. It was fun to do that because of the weapon system, the weapon solutions that you could get. Made it a lot of fun, and it was a tough airplane. It was hard to break that son of a gun. Built really strong. Not the fastest, not the most maneuverable, but a good airplane. It was pretty incredible. We, aside from camaraderie between the sister squadrons, the Stingers and the Fist, which was normal and natural, there's always competition between every squadron, and mostly in the area of landing on the ship, because every landing was graded. And that was a way to elevate people's performance, because their grade impacted the squadron grade, not only their individual grade, but their being able to do their best impacted the squadron grade. So each squadron competed. What was neat about our squadron is we had a former small college All-American quarterback from Slippery Rock, John Ross, and we played football and basketball against every other squad in the air wing and whooped them, because we had all these big guys, and that was a lot of fun with that outfit. Yeah, I did two cruises, just one tour, but 2 cruises. The bicentennial cruise in '76, hanging, being in import and hanging an American flag from about the 6th floor of a hotel there, and down at the pool, celebrating in a foreign country, if you will, but just so proud. Yeah, that was really a great year. After 25, I went to VA 127, and we were just starting there, an adversary program, taking the A4 and learning Soviet, then in those days, Soviet tactics, so that we could take those planes and teach the A7, which wasn't quite as maneuverable, how to react and not to overreact, and keep your energy up and all this good stuff, because you didn't want to get slow against the aggressors, the adversaries. And we simulated, small Russian airplanes, and we could intimidate with the nose positioning. Anyway, too much on that, but the A4, we slicked them down a little bit, down to sometimes a small centerline drop tank, and went all over the place. Had a great time. Pretty rewarding to teach your A7 buddies, your community, your light attack community, how to be better in the air-to-air environment. And everybody loved it. They loved dogfighting, so it was fun, a very fun tour. I went from there to the Philippines to a composite squadron, which usually is a career-ending tour, but they had old A4s there, and they wanted to get into the air-to-air business, the aggressor business, the adversary business. And I had now 2.5 years of doing that, so I became kind of the lead in that. So we slicked down these old A4 Echoes and took the tanks off and painted them camouflage colors, and we went all over the Pacific, fought against, we fought against the Singapore Air Force. Of course, the U.S. Air Force were in the exercises in South Korea called Team Spirit at that time. There's something else now. And then up into Okinawa and at Sugi, we supported Top Gun when their instructors came over, let them fly our airplanes. So that was a great tour. So that was my second tour as an adversary. So then when I got to my department head tour in A7s and VA-22, I felt pretty good about how we could learn how to fly the airplane. By the way, my first adversary tour with VA-127, I went to Top Gun. They had developed a 6-week course for that very thing of training, you know, and teaching people how to fight. Yeah, Jerry Palmer. When I was in the Philippines, he had a debt there, or he came in on the ship or something, and we had a lot of interaction. He said, "I want you to be in my squadron." So he said, "When you leave VC5, you're going to VA-22." And that's the way it went. And then he was there for a while, and then Ray Kellett took over, and then Rich Burns took over. That was good. Wonderful people to work with again. You know, I had, as a department head, as an ops officer, I had Ken Bowersox working for me, who went on to command the International Space Station. Right. You know, a young fellow from Indiana, very unassuming. You would never say, "Oh, he's an astronaut. You're going to be an astronaut." You know, just a good guy. A bunch of wonderful people to work with in VA-22, and what that did, it lets you coalesce as a team, you know. So everything you did, everything you endeavored to do, you know, operations out off the coast, you know, when you're in being tested on how you would do, we did really well. So it was a good outfit, good squadron. I went to be on the wing staff, Lat Wing, Commander Light Attack Wing Pacific. I worked for Norm Campbell first, and then Bear Taylor after that. I was the flag secretary, and he had a flag lieutenant, but both of us wore a loop around our shoulder, and we called ourselves, you know, they were called loopers, you know, horse holders or whatever. But that was a good tour. I learned a lot of the other side of managing and administrating an air wing, a shore-based wing, the Light Attack Wing, but learned a lot about that, a lot of what people had to work with doing inspections on squadrons, excuse me, and making them not a horrible experience, right? Because I'd been there, I'd seen that, and I wanted this to be a helpful. We're here to help, right? And everybody's saying, "Yeah, right, you're here to help." But we tried to make it that way, and so we got to do that a lot. Write speeches for the Admiral. That speech writing was good, and made me do a lot of research, and it has helped me later on in life with making speeches and doing speeches. So, and that was good. That was a good tour. At the end of that tour, I was up for a command screen to see if I could screen to be a squadron commander. And the F-18 had come into the fleet, and there was a command screening position, a position once you were screened you could be assigned to, that wasn't real popular, and that was in Japan. We have a ship and an air wing full-time still in Japan. A lot of people don't know that. But it was really an interesting idea I had. I said, "Look, if I screen, I will," and because you could, if you screened, and that day, about half the guys went to A7s, and maybe a little less than half would go to F-18 squadrons. I said, "I'll go to Japan if you'll let me screen for an F-18 squadron." So I did, and I got the Dam Busters, VFA 195. When I was on the wing staff, I got to trap on to do carrier landings on some other carriers to visit with squadrons, and that was kind of cool. So I would get some other squadron's A7 and stay current with landing on a ship and go out and you know, just come aboard. It was really cool. That was kind of cool, you know. The Hornet was probably about a 25 to 50% improvement, but not you know, it wasn't that far ahead of the A7. Pretty far, what it could do, but still, you know, you still had to work at it. Now it's, of course, the F-18. All the electronics have changed so much. Technology's improved everything. So now it's a leader in what it does. The F-18 is. It was then too. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing to transition to that airplane. because you could do everything with it. I mean, it was designed to be a fighter and a light attack airplane at the same time, and with a single seat. There were enough challenges, but the training system was pretty well developed, and that's important. You know, you've got to know that when you're transitioning people, what they're coming from, and we had mostly retired naval aviators as instructors in the sims and ground instructors, and really good instructors in the F-18 training squadron, which was VFA 125. The A-7s were still in the VA 122. So it was a well-developed training program. So difficulties, I think the hardest thing for an A-7, some of the A-7 guys, was to learn how to be a fighter pilot. Yeah, fly on your own jet as a fighter, how to employ air-to-air weapons effectively. You know, we didn't have anything that was, I guess, the Shrike, or not the Shrike, yeah, the Shrike, Sparrow. No, the Sparrow. The Sparrow was just about a beyond visual range, as long as you knew that target on the radar. So using the radar for air-to-air, that got to be a good learning experience, and being able to fire weapons out, something you couldn't visually acquire. And I remember that was a rich experience, seeing that kind of a radar. I mean, the A-7, we used to be able to pick up an airliner if we were really clever about how we tweaked the elevation, but with the F-18, the technology was amazing for air-to-air stuff. It was good to be humble, you know, but be proud at the same time. It was a tough airplane. We were single-seat guys. That was kind of something to know, that you were reliant upon yourself and no one else. And it was good to always have a wingman, and that airplane was really fun with that. I remember some cross countries in it back in the day, going through the Grand Canyon in the A-7, which you wouldn't want to do nowadays with anything probably, but I'd say just the small cadre of pilots in an A-7 squadron was good, because you built this closeness. You know, it kind of all goes back to the foundation of having a squadron. That's the people. The airplanes are great. The A-7 was a great airplane, but it's the people that you get to work with in those squadrons that were under the same kind of stresses. We had the limitations of the airplane on occasion, but we also had the expanded capability. I mean, when the FLIR came out, going out and looking for ships at night with a FLIR pod, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. So when the Navy kept putting the most advanced weapon systems on the Corsair, on the A-7, that was a pretty cool learning thing, and I think you'd be pretty proud about. But you were always humbled by the fact you couldn't go supersonic, right, you know, and but you could carry a lot of bombs. You could do a lot of good stuff. I've got as an aside, I had dinner last night with John Perone, one of my skipper in VC5, and Jerry Arbeiter, who is an old hand at this. He was John's wingman on a strike in North Vietnam, and they flew through. They didn't get deconflicted with an Arclight B-52 flight, and I've got a picture that I got last night, saved, that Jerry Arbeiter took, of an A-7 with a hole in the tail, and that was John Perone's airplane. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, sir.
I got to show you that. Yeah, maybe after the interview. But pretty cool. The airplane could take, the A-7 could take a lot of damage. That was a good, strong airplane. Leaders in the Navy, flag officers, et cetera, came from the light attack, what they call the light attack community, A-7 community, because we learned how to operate independently as well as with wingmen. But, you know, there were times you'd go out there by yourself on a mission just looking for ships and stuff, and you were by yourself, but you learned how to do that and be self-sufficient without a lot of backup stuff. The airplane was built with backup systems, but as far as a lot of help, you'd hope to have a good inertial system, but that didn't, with your home base moving on the move the whole time you're out there, sometimes it didn't help a lot. But so it helped you to become more self-sufficient. Bye.